Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, the latest political news in our weekly update with the Arizona Capital Times, and we'll discuss Arizona issues from a congressional point of view with U.S. Representative Paul Gosar. Those stories next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. A federal judge ruled today that Arizona and Kansas can require proof of citizenship when residents use a federal form for voter registration. Both states sued the Federal Election Assistance Commission after the commission had refused to add a state-mandated proof of citizenship on federal registration forms. Arizona Secretary of State Ken Bennett says he was, quote, delighted with the ruling. State Senator Steve Gallardo criticized the decision, saying that college students in particular will be harmed by the judge's ruling. The state Senate released its budget this week, and lawmakers again attempted and failed to undermine Arizona's new education standards. Here now with our weekly political update is Jim Small of the Arizona Capital Times. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let's get to this budget business now. Senate releases, I think the House did today, correct?
Correct.
What are we seeing comparing and contrasting to what the governor is looking for?
Essentially, the legislative budget proposals, as they exist now, want to spend less than what the governor called for, and they anticipate a little bit less in state revenues also. The Senate heard the bills in committee yesterday. They got out of the committee along party line votes, so Republicans supporting, Democrats opposing, and they're expected to go to the floor tomorrow morning. Actually, they're meeting bright and early, 8:30 in the morning, to go to the floor and debate the bills, and then they'll come back sometime later in the afternoon and vote on the bills and send them over to the House. On both House and Senate side, any grumbling going on there from the Republican side in particular, because that's where the problems were last session? Well, right now, no. Even the breakaway Republicans from the Senate from last year in the fight over the Medicaid expansion look like they're all going to vote for the budget when it comes out of the Senate tomorrow. I think there's a sense of trying to move the negotiations along and realizing that this isn't the final budget. Mm-hmm. That whatever gets out of the Senate, or conversely, whatever gets out of the House next week, is going to have to go to the governor. It's not going to be able to go straight to the governor's desk, and they're going to have to work some things out with her to figure out where they're going to end up.
And one of those things I'm sure they're going to have to work out is this business of no new funding for a Common Core assessment, a Common Core test. I mean, Zero. Is that a placeholder or is that serious business?
No, it looks to be serious business right now. I think the governor's budget requested, I want to say somewhere like $13 million, maybe something like that, $15 million for this assessment, which the state hasn't signed on to yet. We don't know which one the state's going to sign on to, and so there is one argument that says, well, until the state decides which one it's going to pick, until we put out this RFP and get bids back on doing this test, we shouldn't allocate any money to it. The business community today, four major business groups, the Arizona Chamber, the Greater Phoenix Chamber, Greater Phoenix Leadership, and the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, sent a letter to all 90 lawmakers today and said, the Senate budget does some really good things. There's some parts of it we really like. But any budget that doesn't include this funding for this assessment is an incomplete budget package. Mm. And it's something that needs to be fixed, because essentially why we're going to have these standards, and if we don't have a test to measure how students are being taught, we're not going to know anything about whether these standards are effective or what needs to be fixed. They said basically we're going to be flying blind in education.
I think coming into the session, the new Child Welfare Agency, which again, there are some discrepancies here. The Senate version wants much less money for the CPS successor, and especially for the transition, than the governor wants. I think most folks thought there would be a little arm wrestling going on with that. But did anyone see Common Core, the assessment for Common Core, possibly being a major issue in this session?
There were some people that did. There was. We started hearing from people in the fall that said, keep your eyes on this idea of this test. Last year there was a big fight. There was basically a bill to get rid of the Ames test and replace it with a test. It was called the Park test, to test against these standards. And that bill ran into trouble, got through one chamber, and then went to the Senate, and it ran into some roadblocks, and so they ended up kind of getting a really stripped down version of that bill through the legislature last year. But that was kind of the harbinger of what we're seeing now, where there is this really ardent anti-Common Core belief that it seems to be stronger in the Senate than in the House, but the House, frankly, hasn't really been tested and hasn't had any of these bills come to the floor yet.
Well, and we just had, 3 more bills that would essentially undermine Common Core in a variety of ways. Once again, those were addressed voted down with the help of some Republicans.
Yeah, and largely it's the Republicans that voted for the Medicaid expansion last year for the budget with the governor. The governor has been a strong supporter of the Common Core standards. You know, they were implemented under her administration. The State Board of Education did that in 2010. She's supported them from the beginning. And she continues to support them. And I think that those votes from those Republicans, they kind of look at it and say, look, the governor wants this, wants these standards, and the business community wants these standards. Why would we vote to get rid of these standards and go back to nothing? Because essentially, if you say the state can't use these Common Core standards, then we have to go back and develop all new standards, or alternatively go back to the ones that were in place, more than a decade, almost 15 years ago.
And it sounds like there's still another bill out there that still needs to be decided, correct, regarding developing standards for requires districts to develop their own standards. I mean, these things just keep on rolling through.
Yeah, they do. That bill, we'll see if it goes to come to the Senate floor or not.
True.
If it does, I don't think it's going too far out on a limb to expect it to meet the same fate as its other similar bills.
The Cap Times has a big story regarding APS and this idea of solar panels and a tax hike on property tax on solar panels, which would be a tax hike. And correct me if I'm wrong here, APS says we have no interest, we have no position on this, and yet it sounds like everyone who talks to APS says, oh, they do have a position on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's last year the Department of Revenue kind of reinterpreted a statute, and the net effect of that was to charge a property tax on the solar panels, residential rooftop solar panels that hadn't been charged before. And so there have been competing efforts down at the legislature this year to either codify the old interpretation, which said these panels aren't taxed, or the new interpretation that says they are taxed, to kind of get something firmly in state law. And the solar industry folks have been saying for months that APS is involved in this. They want this tax to be in place. APS has consistently said, no, we have no position on this bill, we have no position on this issue, it's nothing that we're involved with. But we've heard from the governor's office that they've met with APS tax folks to discuss this issue, among others, and also some legislators who, House Majority Whip Rick Gray told one of my colleagues, yeah, I met with an APS lobbyist, and he wants he was supportive of this tax, and this the Representative Gray, represents the Sun City area. Mm-hmm. Sun City is one of the major areas that the solar industry has installed a lot of rooftop solar, both in on some of the community centers and also in people's homes, with selling them on the idea that, if you're on a fixed income, if you can reduce your energy costs by $50 or $100 a month, that's a good thing.
And it sounds like the property tax assessment would hike perhaps the average resident maybe seeing $50 to $70 a month of an increase, correct?
Yeah, and so when you kind of run the math on it, you realize that if this tax goes into effect, and essentially the tax will be on, say, a company like Solar City, but it'll get passed on to the consumer. And so you essentially wipe out any energy savings that they would have right there on the average unit and on the average tax.
So where do we go on this? We have a couple of bills out there. One says we're going to make sure that this assessment doesn't happen, and another says what? We're going to listen to what APS has to say, or what APS says they're not saying, but apparently they are, and look at this tax.
Yeah, there's a couple competing things that are out there. One of them's in this tax conformity bill, which is something that the state does every year to make its tax code line up with federal tax changes. There's a provision in there that would essentially codify the new interpretation of the law, and say that this tax happens. And just yesterday, though, the Senate Elections Committee heard a strike everything amendment that does the opposite and basically says, no, we're going to make sure that this tax doesn't happen. Michelle Reagan, the sponsor of that amendment, she said, look, I was here in 2006 and 2007 when we put in that exemption for this rooftop solar. The point was specifically to do that, to make sure that these people aren't paying a tax on it in order to encourage use of it. And so we're not going to go back and try to rewrite the rules. That DOR basically didn't have it, was acting out of order when it went and reinterpreted that statute.
Well, definitely to be continued. Before you go, real quickly, we're going to talk more about this with Congressman Gosar, but Tesla, there's a bill now out there. Is this a striker? I don't know if it's a striker or not, but Tesla, they can't sell their cars here. There's a move to change that kind of a situation?
Arizona's law requires you to basically have a dealership in order to sell vehicles here. So if you've been to anyone who's been to Scottsdale Fashion Square and seen the Tesla store, they can't actually sell you a vehicle there. They kind of have to jump through some hoops to do that. You can't test drive and things like that. There's a bill to try to open that up and say, well, we'll let direct sales from auto manufacturers directly to the consumer. It's being fought by the Dealerships Association. The dealerships aren't terribly happy about it. I think they see some potential harm to them down the line if all of the car companies or if other major car companies decide to do the same thing and essentially put them out of business.
All right, we'll see where that one goes as well. Jim, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Billy Von Nero heard them say in an Arizona town one day that a band of Apache Indians were upon the trail of death. Heard them tell a murder done, 3 men killed at Rocky Run. They're in danger at the car ranch, said Von Nero under breath.
Just off I-10 in the town of Quartzsite stands a pyramid gravestone to a curious name still celebrated in these parts, Haji Ali. Haji Ali was actually Haji Ali, a Greek-Syrian immigrant who came to the United States in 1856. He worked for the Army as the caretaker of a herd of animals being used in an experiment aimed at establishing a new way to transport goods across the southwestern deserts, by camel. The Civil War ended the Army's fascination with the camels, and they were turned loose in the desert. Haji Ali remained a faithful Army scout for some 30 years and died in Quartzsite in 1902. Wild camels were spotted in Arizona as late as 1935, and some believe they still roam the desert. A haunting and romantic legacy of Haji Ali, whose monument still attracts thousands of visitors every year.
Expand your horizon with the Arizona Horizon website. To get there, go to azpbs.org. Click on the Arizona Horizon tab at the top of the screen. Once there, you can access many features, watch interviews by clicking on the video button. You can also find out what's on Arizona Horizon for the coming week. If you would like an RSS feed, a podcast, or want to buy a video, that's all on the website too. Want to learn about specific topics like immigration or the legislature? You can visit our special web sections. Show your support for Arizona Horizon at azpbs.org/Arizona Horizon.
Republican Congressman Paul Gosar represents Arizona's 4th Congressional District, which covers western and northwestern parts of the state and stretches into the Phoenix metro area. Representative Gosar joins us tonight on Arizona Horizon. Good to see you again.
Great seeing you, Ted.
We talked about Tesla with Jim on the update, what's happening at the state level. Considering this big old battery plant, I guess, for Arizona, the entire congressional delegation signs a letter off on this. Talk to us about this.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I mean, so we can agree on something.
Yes.
This is something very, very important, 6,500 jobs. We want to show that Arizona is open and willing for business, and our whole delegation wanted to embrace that and to show that the sincerity from a bipartisan standpoint. So this is a good move.
Is there concern about that state law that requires a dealership to sell a vehicle? Is that something that needs to be looked at from your perspective?
I think this from the standpoint from the governor, the Commerce Authority, and the state legislature to look at, because as a federalist, I want to make sure that the states have their jurisdiction and work with them, and that's always what we've tried to do. We've had lots of inquiries from other companies as well as manufacturers, and then we want to push them the same way. We don't want to pick and choose winners, but we surely want to make sure that there's a job market, that we're open and willing for jobs right here in Arizona.
In the letter, a quote, "At every level of government, we've worked hard to create one of the best business environments in the country by removing obstacles that stifle job creation and economic growth." With that in mind, we just went through this SB 1062 thing where a lot of folks were making fun of Arizona for right or wrong, regardless of that reason. That image is, how are we doing well by that image? People mention Tesla. They may not want to do business in a state that has that kind of image. Does that make sense to you? Is that
I
valid?
I don't know that that's the image, Ted, because we came into this union as the last of the lower 48 to come in, and we were always asking questions. We wanted to recall federal judges, and President Taft said, "Hey, you're not going to do that coming into the union." So, the one thing you got to do is that we have a maverick type of attitude in this state, and I think that's what's necessary for this next new generation of Arizonans to embrace and be the power of the Southwest. So I don't run from it. I run to that because we're willing to ask the question. And if you're not willing to ask the question, then I guess the status quo is good enough for you.
Was it concerning to you, though, that a firm that looks at diversity and acceptance, like a Tesla, might be concerned about an SB 1062?
They might be, and as a business model, they ought to look at that. I just hope what they look at is the golden opportunity for them to be, part of a historic movement in Arizona. That's what's so empowering. You've got great sky, blue skies. You got a great workforce. You're talking about batteries that are state of the art, and here we are, the mining center of the United States. Hey, it's time to play business.
One more note on this. The letter mentions that education, the highly skilled workforce was mentioned, I should say, in the letter. And yet others are saying highly skilled workforce right now, education in Arizona is not emphasized enough to make that kind of a claim.
I disagree. I mean, I think we have our own aspect of growing pains in education. We've got 3 great universities. You look at NAU, you look at ASU and U of A, great universities, hardly, stair-stepping stones. They're at the forefront of that. And I think what we're doing is we're trying to find our way in regards to having an education and an oversight of our educational system at the K through 12 level. I think that's what's really important is that we're tired of the status quo. Instead of teaching to the medians, we want to teach to excellence. And I think that's the power behind what Arizona's coming from.
Tesla is expected to decide when? What are we looking
Here shortly.
for?
They've given some notices that we're in that final evaluation. So it could be any time.
Okay. Renewable energy on public lands is an issue that's up for discussion here. What exactly are we talking about here?
What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring local control to some of the oversight on public lands. And that is in renewables like solar and wind and geothermal, that some of these royalties that are expected to come back to the state, that they are divvied out in appropriations so that they come to the state of jurisdiction, 25%, 25% goes to the county of jurisdiction, so that the counties that are most responsible for having these public lands, having to maintain and take them, actually get the revenues to come directly for them. And also starts that process of everybody having skin in the game in the permitting process. So it's a win-win for the local communities.
Is it revenue sharing similar to what you see with oil exploration?
Absolutely. We want to be on the same footing, so the areas that have it actually benefit from it.
And infrastructure would be one of the things that would benefit, I would imagine.
Well, we would allow that the county and the state to decide with that in that regards. And there's another 15% that actually goes to the permitting process and streamlining, and 35% goes to establishing corridors for endangered species and our nature preserves.
What are those numbers now? What's the current situation?
It goes partly to the state and partly to the federal government. And part of that reason in the last budget process, we split those revenues on public lands 50-50, some of it coming to the state, some of it going to the federal government. That was extended now to 52% going to the federal government and only 48% coming to the state. And that's where what we need to do is have an equitable type of application of those royalties coming back to the home place of home reserve.
Are we seeing renewable energy production? Are we seeing an increase? Are we seeing the promise of an increase on federal lands now?
I think the opportunity is absolutely there. And Ted, instead of being a follower, we're trying to lead the way and start that discussion so that everybody is utilizing our public lands in a profitable and an enhanced use application.
Flood control issues always big in Arizona, especially in rural Arizona. Yep. Update on what's happening here.
Well, we saw that, the budgetary plan. We got 3 of those instances move forward. One in the Big South is the Lower Santa Cruz. Mm-hmm. Here we've been handicapped by episodic flooding. It's time to harness that water and starting to look at particularly our growth aspects of infrastructure and transportation. Let's harness it. Let's make it the CAP of the South. And then, of course, some of the projects up north with the Rio de Flag, which is a constant battle trying to get the feds to finish up an agreement in Flagstaff, and then the Winslow levee over in Winslow. And
this is what fixes retention basins and what protects homes and rail lines even in Flagstaff, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the southern part of Flagstaff below the tracks is very episodically floods. And so what this does is channel that episodic flooding away from those businesses and allows them to have good commerce and good transportation.
And this was $3 million, talking $3 million?
And this is some of the things that we constantly go over and over again until we get this thing remedy and done. And it benefits us to have a cohesive long-term plan instead of these episodic budget continuing resolutions.
It also benefits to have more than one lawmaker working on this. You teamed with Ann Kirkpatrick on this, didn't you?
I do. I mean, you know, when we were elected to represent everybody. And, you know, I'm a builder kind of guy. I used to do it very small-like. You know, but the thing about it is that's what enhances an economy. It doesn't build an economy, but it enhances it. And this is one of the jurisdictions that the federal government in Article 1, Section 8 is responsible for, is the commerce and infrastructure aspects.
And I was noticing that some of this business is not even in your district, correct?
I was hired to help Arizona, and that's my intention, is to help anybody that needs my help.
You also came out just recently now with an idea, a number of ideas, 5 I believe, on cutting costs, cutting federal costs on everything from plane flights for congressional members to bonuses for VA executives. Talk to us about this.
Well, we've got to be serious about waste, fraud, and abuse, and we have to enhance and actually follow through on our promises to the American taxpayer that government is riddled with fraud. And we have to start acting up and answering up. And what we've done in the budgetary process, Ted, it gives you that opportunity to put these ideas forward and to acknowledge, show the American people that we can actually cut these costs. They're reasonable, they're sound, they're common sense, and then make sure that they're applied into the budgetary process.
When you talk about something like prohibiting members of Congress from flying first class, though, is it wise to call that fraud? Does that help the debate? Does that move the conversation forward?
Well, you know, the thing about it is I lead by leadership. You know, I walk a mile in my moccasins, and I lead by that example. You know, a lot of us get upgraded into first class when there's, you know, empty seats, and that's fine. But we shouldn't be buying first class tickets. And I think that what we should do is lead by example, not expect everybody else to do it and not us.
Another one was these life-size photographs of building facades. What is that all about?
Well, I mean, when you do restoration projects like what you've seen in Washington, D.C., particularly on the Washington Monument, we had to put these huge facades on there to make it pretend like nothing was happening. I mean, what's the problem with having an actual discussion about that we're fixing the Washington Monument or the Supreme Court building? That's extra cost, and that's fluff that we can't afford right now.
And another one, Netu, is the funding for the Highway Traffic Safety Administration's roadside survey. This is getting a lot of attention here. I wasn't even aware that this survey existed and that folks could just pull you over there and start asking you questions and doing all sorts of things. Talk to us about this.
Well, this is bureaucracy gone amok. I mean, what we need to do is streamline, use common sense applications with the average person. And these are some of the little things that we've been able to pick up in regards to the bureaucracy, the spending habits. We don't have a habit of pulling in revenues. We've got a big problem with spending.
So basically what you're saying with these 5 is you're not saying anything here that breaks the bank, tips the bank one way or the other. It's the message?
It's a message, but they all add up. You know, every mom and pop is, you know, tightening their belt. And it's a little here, it's a little there. It's conscientious cuts. You know, we didn't like sequestration because it cut all the way across the board. Well, this is the scalpel knife coming in here. So we're exposing and putting light on the spending problems in the bureaucracy. And then let's answer up and get it done. You know, trust is a series of promises kept. Let's restore trust.
What kind of response are you getting from these?
We're getting a lot. I mean, you know, we're going to go through the process, you know, so you still got to go through the rules process. You still got to get a vote. But these are common sense, and I don't think many people are going to have big problems with them.
Back in Washington, we talked about Arizona issues here, but for national issues right now, the Ukraine is major. What's happening with this missing airplane is on everyone's mind. I don't know what Congress can do about it, but I mean, everyone is talking about this kind of thing. On Capitol Hill, what is the mood regarding foreign relations and what's happening around the world in general?
We have lost our place as a world leader and a director of the traffic of what's good and what's wrong and what's good. This is an exercise that you exercise what you actually done and have done in your history. And when you make lines in Syria and then you don't follow through, when you aren't sincere about your actions, they come to rest here. When you don't do actions like the Keystone Pipeline, imagine for a second that what we did with Putin and say, listen, you know what? Go across that line, we are going to economically strangle you because we've got the energy to export to Europe. All of a sudden it becomes very different to Putin because he doesn't have a marketplace for the only thing that he's got as marketable assets is gas and oil.
We got 30 seconds left here, but is Putin the kind of guy where you beat him down in public, that's a good idea, or do you let him crow a little bit and then work under the scenes.
I think what we need to do is, I'm more interested in what we do as Americans' image, building up a trusted friend and an ally, than I am with Putin, because I think once you restore the respect that you have for the United States, Putin will fall in line.
All right. Congressman, always a pleasure. Good to see you again.
It's my pleasure.
Thursday on Arizona Horizon, we will talk about the economics of marijuana from a business journalist's point of view. Then we'll take a video tour of the Deer Valley Rock Art Center, which features a sizable collection of petroglyphs. Those stories and more Thursday, 5:30 and 10, right here on the next Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.